Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I'm so glad to be here today. Um, as Brett mentioned, I'm a faculty member at UMass Chan Medical School. And before that, I was at UCSF. So I've been at two major public medical campuses that really focused on graduate and postdoctoral education in the spheres where I worked. But I haven't interacted with undergraduates for probably about 20 years in terms of education. So a number of you may be working with graduate students and postdocs, and a number of you may also be working with undergraduate students. So throughout this session today, I want to welcome you to think about all the ways that the things that I talk about resonate for you when you think about your mentorship or training programs for graduate students and postdocs, and to also think about the ways that they might resonate for supporting undergraduate students or master's students, um, postbac students, or students at other levels. I've also worked with faculty, and a number of these principles also apply to faculty as well. So all of us bring so much experience to the table. So I'm sure that you're going to pick and choose and think about some of the things that I raise. I want today to talk about how to support the career development of our graduate students and postdocs, or any of the other individuals we mentor or support. And so leverage the experience that you bring to the table as you draw connections with some of the things that I raise and think about to your current work or ways that you might want to adjust what you do. So what I'm going to be talking about today, this is where I'm especially going to focus on is around career decision making and career exploration. And why is this so important? When you look at PhD students, at least, PhD training is multiple years long, and multiple studies have now shown that though PhD students might come in knowing they want a career in science, really excited about pursuing deeper training in science, their career interests typically shift and change a number of times during the years that they're in training. So for example, I give two papers here as references if you want to dive into this more deeply. This figure is from Christine Wood's paper in Rick McGee's lab, which was published in 2020 in PLOS One. And what Christine Wood did was interview students from the beginning of their graduate training all the way to graduation. And so each of these lines in this graph represents an individual student. And at these different time points, what career interests they described in those interviews. And each color coordinates with a different category of types of different careers. And I've kind of really generalized them into big bins here. But what you can see is that some students did stay consistent in their career interests throughout their training, but you also see so many crisscrosses of lines. And so there's a lot going on throughout the years of training where their career interests shift and change. Studies looking into the mental health crisis for graduate education have noted that one of the highest reasons for stress and strain for graduate students that they list in surveys is a lack of career development and lack of support and clarity for what they're going to do next. Postdocs also express a lot of concern around this. Every year, the National Postdoc Association does a needs assessment nationally of postdocs, asking postdocs about their various needs and their concerns. And here you can see, of course, postdoc salary has been a big big conversation with a number of like a high percentage of postdocs expressing concern about their salary and compensation. But almost just as high is their concern about a lack of clarity for their career pathways to their next position. And in fact, 90% of postdocs listed this as a concern in 2023. Just going to move some things around on my screen here so I can better see you. Okay. So this is a real concern and issue, right? So in 2016, and around that time, so about 10 years ago now, there were a number of summits and events and things happening where people were starting to realize that we needed to more broadly think about the different types of career paths that PhD level trainees move into, and really trainees at all levels move into. And that especially at the PhD level, we tend to have a lot of emphasis about becoming faculty. But if you remember 10 years ago or so, and even 20 years ago, people were really starting to talk about the fact that only a small percentage of PhDs in the sciences move into faculty positions, and yet our training was really still largely set up as an apprenticeship for those type of positions. And this has led to this kind of input and strain and concern from students and postdocs in the pipeline. Ultimately, this is a concern for supporting, including and encouraging people to come into the sciences because you want them to feel that there are viable careers moving forward. Um, and I know that's an issue today. So we're going to talk about today's context as well. So in 2016, ASBMB hosted a summit about this, and one of the key issues that was raised was that there needed to be a central place to find evidence-based practices to better support the professional development of graduate students and postdocs, and to do so in a way that was inclusive across career paths and opportunities. And so this was the start of Professional Development Hub, or PD Hub. It was a working group that I co-chaired, that I was invited to co-chair, and then the group asked me to continue to lead the initiative forward and to continue to form working groups to figure out ways that we could create this hub, resource and sustain the hub, and make it a place for, again, institutions could find resources to do this much more efficiently and not have to reinvent the wheel. We've been working on this national initiative from a very cross-stakeholder perspective. So that original working group had people across the spectrum, from funders at federal agencies and foundations to publishers who disseminate work, graduate school directors, so faculty mentors, also career development professionals, and scientific societies, et cetera, and students and postdocs. So we've taken this cross-stakeholder approach to really think about how can we help faculty and staff at their various institutions across the science trainee ecosystem do a better job at this? And how can we elevate the practices that are already known? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about so why is this important for career development, and why are we going to focus on career exploration today? And that's because career exploration is not as simple as saying, I want to pursue this career path. There's a lot more complex things going on. And so that's where I'm going to kind of focus today, as well as draw your attention to some different activities and strategies you can use to address these complexities. So when we look at what underlies career exploration, which is the topic that we've been looking at first through PD Hub, there's some key themes that come out that are part of the process of exploring and deciding about what next step you want to take, right? So one is called self-assessment in the literature for vocational psychology. And this is really ultimately about building awareness of yourself. And this includes things like skills, interests, values, things that are really important, things that you need to have as part of your career decisions, a variety of things. Another element of exploring and figuring out what you want to do is something we call, through PD Hub, identity sharing. So it's a process of kind of talking about yourself to others, kind of trying on the hat of a career path that you're thinking about. A key aspect also is career investigation. So researching different options, right? Reading articles, reading profiles of alumni, talking to alumni, doing informational interviews, et cetera. So investigating careers and becoming informed about different options. There's also then this process tying in the self-assessment with considering your own career fit. And this can also be done through identity sharing. So the idea with career fit is you're assessing how well a given career path feels like it aligns with what you want or need. And as you talk about yourself in relation to this career path, it kind of either fits or feels like it doesn't really fit. There's goal setting, right? So as you start to narrow your paths, for example, you're defining clear steps where you might need to further enhance your own professional development or preparation for that type of career path so you can be competitive for moving into that one. Then there's also, all of this can actually be accomplished, or students can be guided through it through giving courses, for example, and I'm going to share with you some examples of those and how to access the lesson plans for them. There's also key other steps, right? So often we offer internships, if we can, or ways for students or postdocs at any level to try out the role. This can be as lengthy as an internship, like 3 months, or it can be as short as something called a job simulation. A job simulation is a task that one can do to simulate a task common to the role. So for example, for a science publisher at a journal or editor at a journal, taking a couple of research papers, pretending that they've just been submitted and reviewing them and considering which one to pitch to the senior editor for moving on to peer review. If you're interested in job simulations, by the way, you can find more resources for those by Googling intersect or microsims, and I can put each of those in the chat in a little bit. Now, these is not necessarily linear, as I talked about already. Some of these pieces kind of overlap and cross with one another and are iterative. And also, they're not done in isolation. So having mentors, in particular, multiple mentors, can really help and inform and support this process, right? And so when we talk about this as a process in this way, it can kind of help people feel like, okay, so I can define career exploration as a purposeful, action-oriented process. I can take these actions, I can move through them, I can find some tools and resources or take a course or something to give me more structure as I do that, and I can ultimately figure out my career path. It can help people feel a little bit more of a sense of control over their career exploration and decision making. In fact, many IDP tools that you've heard about, such as My IDP, which Brett mentioned, I co-wrote originally through AAAS's Science Careers website. My IDP and also Chem IDP for chemists through the American Chemical Society. Both of those tools and other tools are designed to guide students and postdocs through this type of framework because it can be difficult to say like self-assessment. How do I know where I'm at? How do I know what's important to me? So there's a number of structured questions and things asked through these types of tools to guide them through that to make these steps easier. Okay, so that's all fine and great. Um, but then today, what about the world we're in today? We're talking today about career exploration in this workshop, and it seems like such an idealistic thing to be able to do. Explore career options and take some time to think about what the career fit is and take some time to get to know myself. Or while suddenly a lot of our trainees are in a situation where they need to make urgent decisions, where they're realizing it's hard for me to plan into the future because I don't even know what this future of the scientific enterprise is looking like right now. So that's a really difficult reality that we're in, right? So these last 2 months, few months actually, have created unprecedented uncertainty and stress for trainees, for faculty, for anyone in the science ecosystem, especially those in higher education. This is a survey done by the National Postdoc Association looking at postdoc perceptions. And it was done, the survey was open between January 20th and February 28th. So it was an early snapshot. And you can see that it was impacting postdocs a lot, with 43% of them feeling that their job or position was threatened, that their research was in jeopardy somehow, right? A lot of different things happening that's making career planning in particular really challenging right now. So I want to share with you as we step back and think about what's happening in today's world and how can we apply that to strategies for career planning now. I think it's really important to think about career resilience. So in the last couple of months, I've been digging more into the literature on career resilience. And what I found is that there's actually a lot of papers on career resilience. Some of them are actually talking about career resilience in the way that it's defined in the literature. Some of them researchers have found aren't really quite about resilience. I found a really helpful review article by Mishra and McDonald published in 2019. So if you want to dive into this more, I'd encourage you to turn to that article. They define career resilience as a developmental process. So it's not a characteristic or a defined trait of somebody, but it's a process. It's a process of persisting, adapting, and or flourishing in one's career, despite the challenges and changing events and disruptions over time. And I don't know about you, but this definition definitely resonates today, right? With things that are happening. So what have they found? They did a structured literature search, and what did they find were the factors that studies have found are linked to career resilience. This is a summary that I put together of the factors that they defined in their review. Things that are tied to personal traits, but also things like beliefs and attitudes, skills that individuals have, their behaviors, and their career history. Of course, their prior experiences in their career can certainly help or hinder, or challenge their processes of career resilience. There's also contextual or environmental factors. And of course, we're experiencing that a ton today, right? So the kind of the support that someone feels within their workplace as they're, experiencing challenges and changing events can impact how able someone is in the moment to take actions that are tied to career resilience. The characteristics of the job that they're in may make it easier or harder to adapt and have career resilience. Their family or personal supports, and other environmental supports or even restrictions. And in today's world, a lot of trainees have restrictions, like if they're on visas or other things, those kinds of things can impact their career resilience. So when we dive into these are broad categories. And when we dive into these categories, these are some of the more specific factors that come out of it. And these are just a few of them. I pulled these out because I felt that they tie most directly to what we're talking about today. Things like self-efficacy. There's a lot in the literature around self-efficacy. Self-efficacy means if I had high self-efficacy, it means I have high confidence that I'll be able to do a given task or do a particular job. Having, again, self-awareness. We talked about that already. Career exploration skills. So being able to navigate and investigate different career paths and consider your career fit. Um, again, learning about career options, self-reflection, tied to all these different types of things. Openness to different and new things, a sense of self-control or call something called protean control. So being able to ground yourself and feeling like there's a lot around me that is completely out of my control, but there are some things that I still can control on my own related to my career. That's really powerful in helping people feel positioned so that they can adapt and be open and have career resilience. Taking professional development actions can help people become more resilient or act in a more resilient way. And of course, self-care, which is at the bottom of this list, but only because it doesn't cluster with the other ones as well. That probably should be at the top. It's extremely, extremely important. In terms of environmental factors, in particular, career mentoring, of course, is really essential. Psychosocial mentoring, because it can be very challenging when external factors come into play and challenge one's career paths and plans. And peer support, which is also really important. I think in science, often we emphasize especially the mentorship from a direct supervisor or advisor of a student or postdoc, but that peer support is really, really important. So I want you to kind of hold on to these themes because you're going to see these themes come back multiple times. And I want to kind of, again, like throughout what I talk about today, think about how some of these things translate to either what you're doing individually in your mentorship of students or postdocs, or what your program or department are doing to support students and postdocs through their workshops, courses, or their training programs. Right? So the question really is, is our mentorship and training programs supporting these factors? And what can we do? Where are places where we're like, maybe we could do a better job in some of these places? And a key thing that I want to bring across is that all of us are feeling really busy and overwhelmed right now. There's a lot of cognitive overload for all of us. So we, of course, first have to take care of ourselves also, but that positions us well to think about there's efficient ways to support students and postdocs in this. And what I'm going to share with you as part of this webinar are suites of workshops and courses that will be available in December through PD Hub that you can go to attain the lesson plans and a lot of planning and implementation strategies to make it much easier to offer workshops and courses if that's one of the things that you'd like to do to support these areas. So I think I'm going to pause here and give a moment for you to kind of take this in. And let's use the chat stream. And I would love it if you could, people could chat in. What are some of the ways that you're seeing your mentorship or training programs address some of these factors that contribute to career resiliency? Um, so I'm going to pause and you can watch the chat stream as well and get a sense of where others are at. So for people in the recording, some of the themes I'm seeing in the chat window are the use of IDPs, supporting students in thinking about doing informational interviews, which means talking to professionals who are already enrolled so they can learn more about them, self-reflection, offering career panels or graduate school panels to help undergraduate students think ahead about graduate school, mental health first aid training. That's awesome. Offering telehealth for mental health support for students, postdocs, and faculty and staff. And some people also reflecting that they feel like they could do more. And I agree, there's a lot here. And as we're going to talk about, career exploration is a pretty complex process. A lot of support is actually needed for this. This is wonderful. Internships, shadowing, bringing guest speakers, professional development workshops to support professional development actions like grant writing. Awesome. You can keep sharing those ideas in the chat window if you'd like, for your colleagues. I'm going to close the chat window for right now on my own screen. So what I want to share with you, what I'm going to transition to now is thinking about ways that we can more efficiently support our students and postdocs. And from my position I spent years and years directly supporting students and postdocs as a professional development program director, as assistant dean, as a faculty member. Now, a lot of my role is actually at the level of supporting institutions like yours, staff and faculty at institutions who are interested in implementing evidence-based practices. But again, we're all busy, and so it doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel. So our goal through PD Hub, again, is to make that much easier by providing you with materials that have kind of pre-vetted and curated and are ready to go. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we've done that for the topic of career exploration. And then from that, I'm going to share with you some of the nuances underlying the process of career exploration that we've learned about as we've developed this collection. And understanding those nuances points to things that you can think about as you implement lessons and workshops or mentorship, such as the ones I'm going to talk to you about. So what have we done through PD Hub? Through PD Hub, we created a framework called the PD Hub Collections. And the idea is that you can go to a conference and hear about a workshop or course, um, but you don't really get enough support to actually follow through and implement. Our goal with the PD Hub Collections were to create collections of lesson plans, each one focused on a different professional development competency. So I'm starting with this slide of names and faces because this, again, is an idea that originated from the working group that we had in 2016, has moved through multiple working groups of people with different expertise and perspectives that we brought onto the project to contribute. And in 2020, we received a grant from the NIH to launch our first PD Hub collection. And so through this launch of our first PD Hub collection, we brought on board people with a wide variety of different expertise so we could really think about how to curate this collection and develop the lesson plans in ways that would support all students and postdocs in ways that could be rigorously evaluated, and how to do that evaluation in a clear way. And I want to give a shout out to my co-investigator, Bill Lindstedt, our program manager, Barbara Natalizio, and our collection specialist, Katie Kearns. So what are the PD Hub collections? This is the way the framework works. The idea is to put out a call for a new collection. So in this case, our first collection was on supporting career exploration. We wanted to find out what models are out there. We already taught with our own models, which is great, but what we really wanted to do is create a sustainable framework for dissemination that would enable us to reach out and hear from people that we didn't even know and find the real gems out there in the community from people who wanted to disseminate their work at this level. So we put out an open call, and open calls like this might attract workshops or courses or self-learning tools. We really said anything goes as long as, in this case, it's around supporting career exploration. We went through a rigorous peer review process that we set up. We defined criteria that we wanted our peer reviewers to look for. They wrote individual reviews, really kind of NSF review style. And then we had review discussions, 2 days of review discussions around these different models. They were then looked at by our consultants as well for certain different characteristics to make sure they were all covering these things. And we had then a collection. The people who contributed the models to the collection, we call fellows. they've actually remained engaged with us for the last 3 years. They spent about 9 months writing up their lesson plans as a cohort with our team. And then we welcomed on two different sets of implementation sites. So the idea is that once we have this curated collection of lesson plans and materials, we wanted to test them at universities and sites around the country. So we put out an open call for individuals who want to participate in that. And they then all implemented. And the idea was to support them through communities of practice, through training, through the lesson plans and implementation guides during the year while they were implementing, and as they thought about what they needed to do to adapt the models for their own learners. Then all the while, we've done centralized evaluation, not only of the framework and how it's working to support dissemination, but also evaluation at the level of the courses and workshops that are in the collection. So we created standardized measurement tools that could work across the different workshops and courses in our collection and have been collecting data from the learners. That evaluation is ongoing right now, so I'm not going to talk about that today, but I am going to talk about kind of what we've learned from these different models. So in this collection, we purposely chose a small set of models. So we ended up selecting 5 different models. 3 of the models right here, contributed by Ryan Wheeler, Paula Cepeda, and Paul Rainey and Marilyn Yeager, are all series or courses. So each of them happen to be eight lessons long. Ryan's course, which we call is an instructor-based course, so it's a little bit more traditional. Students are guided through exercises during the classroom time, might be given some homework to do to prepare for the next classroom time, where they'll do interactive exercises and such together again. Some of the key things that they do in this course include creating an IDP poster at the end to summarize what they've been learning through their career exploration and what they're thinking about as next steps. And in the middle, when they're doing their career investigation, each student takes a career path to explore and investigate, and then they give presentations to each other so that they're learning from each other as well as synthesizing what they learned to share with their peers. Paula Cepeda contributed a model that was developed at Stony Brook University. This is a peer-facilitated model. So whereas an instructor might guide students through the first model, in this course or series, you initially lead it yourself, but then you recruit past participants to act as peer leaders. And what we found from our implementation sites is that they really love seeing the peer facilitators lead the sessions, and that they find that the students and postdocs really open up in new ways and seem more comfortable in different ways, talking with each other when there's a peer facilitator leading it. This green model in the middle, contributed by Paul Rainey and Marilyn Yeager, is a flipped classroom model. So the idea is that students and postdocs use the classroom time when they're all together really to have more open discussion with some structured reflection questions. But they watch videos and do some exercises and homework ahead of time so that they can make the most of discussion time when they're together in the classroom. These last 2 models are both workshops. So Superbui Tepsipurn contributed a workshop called the Creating Your Career Compass. And the idea is to, as you're preparing for your career exploration, to kind of ground yourself in what's most important to you, what you find most motivating in your work, what's most meaningful, what your values and interests are. And so it's a 90-minute, 2-hour workshop where students are kind of articulate these things and bring and synthesize the ideas together to help them then have a set of things to ground them as they move on to their career exploration. This last model is also a workshop contributed by Urmila Venkatesh, and it's focused on a storytelling framework. So the idea is that sometimes we tell stories and we kind of make assumptions about what career paths are the right fit for us. And she leverages storytelling as a way to open and broaden your horizons, to talk through different ways that your transferable skills and lived experiences might apply to different types of career paths. And so the goal is for students to leave the workshop having a sense of how talking through your own stories can help you get a better sense of yourself and broaden your horizons for the types of career paths you might want to explore. And also to consider listening to people's stories as a way to learn more about their career interests and their career trajectories. So as you can see, these represent 5 different implementation approaches, while all of them are aiming to support career exploration. All these models also focus on the foundation of career exploration. So they're not doing internships or other types of deeper exploratory activities. These are the initial sets to guide students through having the skill set to do their own career exploration later. All of them also leverage peer support. We talked about earlier under career resilience how important it is not just to rely on mentorship, but also to have peer support and peer mentorship. All the implementation sites and the students have talked about the value of being able to hear the stories of their peers and realizing that the challenges that they're facing are challenges that are shared by other people and feeling that they have a great support system around them. They're also grounded in studies around career decision making and persistence. So that was something that we looked for as well. So what we've done over the last 2 years is had two different cohorts of implementation sites around the United States, including, so for a total of 36 sites. There was a breadth of sites. Many of them were universities, some of them medical schools, some of them research institutes, and we even had two scientific societies participate where they offered the workshops to their members. We've had more than 70 implementations and over 1,000 students and postdocs as learners, including, I'm not sure if we had undergraduates, but we had some postbac students and some master students at some of the sites. And some of the sites also went across disciplines, including students or postdocs in the humanities or other disciplines. One of the values of doing this in this way is that we're going to be publishing these lesson plans and putting them out there on our website in December. And when we do that, the lesson plans that we put out will be informed by this diversity of perspectives from all these implementation sites. What we've really seen is how adaptable each of these models are. And we've been able to comment and document adaptability based on a number of different factors, like whether it's part of a curriculum or how frequently the students and postdocs meet, whether it's online or hybrid or in person, the level of support that the central office had in facilitating it, all kinds of different things like this. So again, this collection will be available in all of its depth with its implementation guides in December. And so you can join our listserv through this link or by going to pdhub.org. And once you join that listserv, we don't send out that many emails, but we will send out emails, targeted emails when we launch this collection, for example. And we're thinking about ways that we can continue offering the implementation site experience, which included training and consultations and monthly community of practice meetings as they implemented the models, so that institutions like yours can more easily adopt these models and not just kind of be on your own with a set of written lesson plans. So both options we're hoping will be available in the future. All right, so I kind of want to close here by then turning to what have we been learning through these different, this experience of developing this collection, looking at these different approaches and diving into the literature and working with, scholars in this space as we've been doing it. A key thing I want you to take away is that career exploration is complex, right? We can best support career exploration through a mix of curricula and central programs in addition to mentorship. So what are these complexities? Well, one of the key things is that career decision making is not just a process that one can follow, check off, and then you're done, but it's very introspective. It's very intertwined with our own personal identities, right? For example, me being a faculty member who focuses on scholarship and national dissemination and policy related to professional development, that's really feels like it's a big part of who I am. And our students and postdocs feel that way too, right? So right now, when a lot of people are being called to be career changers and adapt in different ways to the career paths that they thought they were pursuing, but maybe they need to do something different now. Or even in normal times, 1 or 2 years ago, when students were, often, or postdocs were often changing their career interests, that can be really stressful because you're really kind of realigning who am I and what am I going to be doing? And how does my career story all fit together? This is something that's been studied and looked at by Herminia Ibarra. She talks about how career decisions for career changers is especially challenging because it involves changing our concept of what we do, adjusting our working relationships and the groups we identify with, and trying new narratives for ourselves that link who we have been and who we will become. And so again, this is part of why it kind of takes some time to make these decisions sometimes or to feel good about career transitions. So what can we as faculty and staff supporting our trainees do about this? I would say one thing is to foster individuals' openness, right? To recognize that to not let our identities become too intertwined with one career path, right? But to recognize we have so many transferable skills and strengths and interests that would apply in a number of different ways in a number of different roles, right? Another way is to create space and time for reflection and even storytelling. You'll see that Herminia Barra's work talks about narratives, and we had a storytelling workshop as part of our collection. When you have a course or a workshop, you're kind of holding that space. You're facilitating by creating a space and a time when students and postdocs can come together and they can do this reflection and think about what they want to do and they can talk it through with someone else. So creating that space and time is really valuable and important. And the other thing I think we can do for this is to help individuals think about not just their career path, which might feel too linear, and it might feel like if I have to pivot and change my career interests, am I leaving that career path? But instead, as a career portfolio. So, your identity, you still remain as yourself, and maybe your next step won't be quite what you had expected, but you're still going to build a really neat set of next skills and experiences that will join into your career portfolio. And you can leverage that full portfolio of your skills and experiences and interests to move into the next steps that you want to move into next. Another key takeaway here is that career navigation does not occur in a vacuum. There's external factors that influence our career decisions every day. We've talked about how current things happening in the science and higher education ecosystem are influencing career decisions. Yeah, I think that's like obvious and in our faces every day right now. But also in normal times, there's more subtle things constantly happening that influence people's career decisions and their persistence towards their career goals. So there's a lot of literature around this, and especially if you looked up social cognitive career theory, you'll find a lot of studies. Social cognitive career theory was the theory through which it was really introduced not, that external factors, it's not just personal traits and strengths that determine your career pathways, but that external factors have a lot of influence. External factors have influence on two things. One is self-efficacy. Again, the question of, am I capable of doing this thing? Am I capable of doing the tasks that faculty members do? Am I capable of doing the things that a medical science liaison would do? And outcomes expectations. If I become a faculty member, what will happen? What will my job look like? What will my day-to-day be like? Or outcomes expectations, like if I become a medical science liaison, what will my job and career look like? So those are outcomes expectations. You might feel like you can do something, but maybe it doesn't align with your expectations for what you want for your career. Now, there's a lot of things that influence self-efficacy and outcomes expectations. These two factors, I should say first, are the two key things that drive, data has shown that drive forward people's career interests, their setting of goals, and their persistence towards those career goals. So those two things then become a lot of emphasis in research studies and interventions to support career exploration. So what are the factors that influence those things? Well, one is mastery experiences. So if I've done a task and I was really good at it, if I wrote a grant and I was fantastic at it, that's going to contribute to my self-efficacy for grant writing and ultimately becoming a faculty member. On the flip side, if I didn't do very well, then I'm going to notice that, and that could negatively impact my self-efficacy. Vicarious experiences. Have I seen others that I see as being like me do it successfully, right? Verbal persuasion. Are people telling me that I'm doing it really well? Or am I getting some feedback that I need to do better? What's the balance of that type of feedback? And physiological and emotional factors. How do I feel when I'm doing something? If I feel lousy about it, like if my body doesn't feel good about it, I have knots in my stomach or whatever it is, that's going to lower one's self-efficacy. So you can imagine that environmental factors like really fantastic mentorship, right? Great experiences, seeing others like me doing these things, all those things can bolster self-efficacy and career outcomes, but they can also have negative effects. When I don't see people around me like me doing things that I want to do, when I get negative feedback consistently or more often than positive feedback, These things, for example, can lead to imposter phenomenon, or deciding that I can't do this. And I know in some cases that might be appropriate. Maybe one's skills aren't very high. But unfortunately, people of certain groups are more likely to feel some of these negative effects than people from other groups. And additional complexity happens for people from different backgrounds. So, for example, international students or students from other groups that might be less represented in the people when they look around them, right? So, when I go into a new environment, let's say a student whose parents hadn't gone to college, right? That student might be coming in and feeling like they want to do some bonding. They want to feel some sense of belonging and connectedness with other people in the academic realm, even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable to them as an individual. And while they're doing that, they're also doing something called bridging, which is kind of immersing themselves with others, but also trying to retain their own sense of self at the same time. And then there's a third factor called buffering. So, kind of when you get some negative feedback, trying to figure out is that negative feedback accurate, or should I kind of be separating my sense of self from the negative feedback that I'm getting, and trying to recognize where things are discriminations or biases and where they might simply be good feedback where you need to grow. So doing bonding, bridging, and buffering for individuals who are newer or coming into a group feeling different from the rest of the group, is a lot of extra work that they're doing while they're doing all this career exploration and growth, right? So it's helpful to remember that the research has shown that can lead to dissonance, emotional exhaustion, and burnout, and especially for the groups that feel the most underrepresented. Uh, Another theme that I want to share with you is one around positionality. And you've probably seen identity wheels like this. The idea is that whenever we're teaching or facilitating something, who we are and our past experiences come into the classroom with us. And that might be different from other people around us. So it's just good to have that awareness and use some curiosity and empathy as we get to know our students and mentees. When we think about career, there's some other additional layers, right? So when I think about when I'm mentoring or advising or facilitating a workshop around career exploration, my own career interests or values or needs or priorities or motivations might be pretty different from the students that I'm talking with. Similarly, my role is pretty different. They're in training roles. My role might be as a faculty member or as a staff member. Faculty might have a lot of years at the institution or a lot of years of experience and prestige in the field, right? And so these different kind of positionalities of yourself in your career, of your career interests, can impact how you teach in career or mentor in the space of career exploration. So it's just good to have that kind of awareness. We can't change our positionality, and that's fine because our uniqueness also contributes. However, it does point to the value of connecting our students and postdocs to a wide variety of resources and mentorship. All individual mentors should be encouraging students and postdocs to find additional mentors, right? Talk to people in the field, get to know others who can also give you feedback. And also think about multiple layers of ways to support them. So, for example, using an IDP worksheet or tool online, but also attending a course or workshop on career exploration so that they can have some of that peer support or see things from new perspectives. Thinking about requiring some of these things as part of the curriculum, or leveraging peer cohorts, or pointing them to career counseling. So, there's a lot of different supports that can help students and postdocs as they explore these things, because we as individuals can't do it all ourselves. I'm putting a link in the chat right now to what we call our PD Hub Idea Sparks worksheet. So while our lesson plans aren't available yet, this Idea Spark worksheet gives you ideas of different activities, lesson activities that have been in our courses and workshops, or lesson activities that I've heard about in the broader community of people doing things in this space to support career exploration, either through mentorship or training programs. So you have that link and you can look at it in more detail after this workshop. So I want to close with this question. If trainees have access to a wealth of resources and opportunities, so we offer them mentorship, they have courses and workshops available, is that sufficient? And I want to share this last piece related to that. And that is something that I've noticed, which is that the culture of research and academia to some extent devalues career planning. Um, so this is something that we noticed in our own students. Our own students in 2016, we had a different NIH grant where we integrated career planning into our curriculum as a requirement. So all third year students take a course, they still do, on career planning. And when we introduced that that new requirement, it initially caused a pushback. Some of the students weren't sure. They weren't used to having courses in their third year of their PhD. Some of the faculty weren't so sure. So I asked the students in an anonymous evaluation at the end of the course what they thought now that they'd been through the course. And they wrote so much. I was actually kind of blown away by how passionate they were and insightful about their experience. And these two quotes kind of sum it up, right? It's important to consider career planning, but it's easy to put it off. It was good to be required to think about these things and break them into their components earlier in their training, basically. And this individual said it was kind of nice to have this required time, again, time and space, right, to think about these topics. It would be difficult for me to justify taking this time to my boss if it wasn't required. So thank you. A lot of students talked about being forced to be there and that they really valued that a lot. In fact, there's a professional association called the Graduate Career Consortium for individuals who lead career development program at the graduate and postdoctoral level. And the top challenges consistently when they do their biennial survey are student attendance, visibility, communicating value, and resistance from faculty. And I would argue that all of these four are clustered. And it's not too surprising. In research, we need to publish. There's a lot of pressures that we have on ourselves. And so we do value people who are in the labs, doing the research, pushing things forward, succeeding. And that can end up, unfortunately, translating to taking time away from professional development or career planning is not as highly valued as actually the research productivity. And the challenge with that is we end up with students and postdocs who are not prepared for their careers. This is actually really important in that postdocs, it's actually part of ONB guidance federally that postdocs be doing professional development as part of their role, even if they're funded on research grants. And I was at the National Postdoc Association meeting recently, and there was still confusion about this, but this has been out there for about 10 years now, saying that professional development is part of the role of a postdoc. So even if they're funded on a PI's research grant, they should be doing professional development also. So I'll leave you with this thought for that then, that as faculty and staff, we can message that career exploration is important and it takes time. And so they should take some time and be thinking about these things thoughtfully. We can use our own stature to build credibility for professional development programs that are effective on our campus and encourage participation. And we can do things, and there's ideas on that idea spark sheet, even for labs to do, right, to create space and time and resources. And we can even build career planning into the curriculum. So I'm going to leave you with some of these thoughts and happy to take some questions, right? In summary, for this webinar, I would say that we really want to think about moving beyond the basics to more deeply support career exploration and think about it in terms of career resilience. And to recognize that some of these things might have to happen quickly right now for some individuals. And for others, we can think a little bit more long term in helping them to support mindsets that will be open, adaptable, and to recognize that they can move into a variety of different career options. This is complex because it ties into our own identity formation, our own professional identities, and that's difficult and it takes time. So we can have empathy around that and normalize that. Using a cohort approach can help with this enormously so that peers can get support from other peers. We can respect that we all have unique experiences and recognize that our own positionality means that we should probably play more facilitators than, guides or advisors per se. We can point students and postdocs to resources and help them see next steps they can take to grow. But we should recognize that environmental factors impact self-efficacy and ultimately career actions and decisions. So we want to foster a welcoming research environment, take assets-based approaches to our training and mentoring, and be intentional to create opportunities for students and postdocs to see role models similar to them around them in the environment. And ultimately, we need to foster a research culture that values career development so that these things can take place and more open conversations can happen to support our students and postdocs. So I'll leave you with this QR code. Please, if you're interested in our lesson plans and materials, they'll be out in December. Go ahead and sign up now, and then we'll be able to email you easily to get them in your hands. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was terrific.
Thanks, Cynthia. That was outstanding. Yeah, a lot of information there. We do have some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the question, Cynthia, and you can answer. So the first question, what advice do you have for trainees who PI relies heavily on their mentees' self-care for support in lieu of institutional, lab-wide, or systemic support or care?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different, if you feel that there's not enough institutional or departmental support available to you as a trainee, I would encourage you connecting with your scientific societies. Most scientific societies, many scientific societies, especially the larger ones, like ASBMB, ASCB, American Chemical Society, American Physical Society, any of those larger professional societies may offer a number of career resources and even career workshops accessible to you by webinar, even, and they might even be free to members. Student memberships are often reduced. That's another way also by participating on committees through scientific societies. It's another way to broaden your networks and meet additional mentors. I would say additionally, there's additional mentorship that you could attain outside of your campus. One place to find mentors is through NRMN, the National Research Mentoring Network.
Great, thanks. And again, for others, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. Here's a sort of a comment, but you might have a response to this. At first semester, one professor was really pushing all PhD students hard. I asked him why, and he said, no need to have uncommitted students in the field. Not very positive, but how would you respond to, how would you address that concern when a student hears that?
They're pushing all the PhD students hard as a way to
maybe weed out the ones
yeah.
that aren't committed.
I think that's really challenging. I would encourage students when they experience that to really think of their own resilience and recognize this is one person who's perhaps a bad actor and might not be representing the culture of the field or even of the department or institution. So I would recognize, and I think other mentors can notice these kinds of things too, and help the students recognize the variety of strengths that they have. In some cases for students, disciplines or certain routes might not be the best fit, but I think sometimes we can be too quick to that judgment and that there's a lot of different ways that success can look. And we need to help students and postdocs identify those ways and or find paths that will feel more fulfilling and like a better fit.
Right. Thank you. And you never know how a student is going to progress. Sometimes students start off a little bit slow, and if you give them enough time, they'll really blossom and really end up strong. And I think faculty have to appreciate that. Everyone's path is very different.
Yeah, that is so true. Yes.
There's a question about My IDP being available. Is it available through the PhD Hub website or other ways?
It's probably not on our PD Hub website, but it's at myidp.sciencecareers.org.
Right. I think it's pretty easy to find. If you put My IDP, they'll be.
Yeah, Google it and you should find it. There's also, if you Google My IDP articles, you'll come up with a series of 12 articles that you can read along with it as well.
Right. Again, we have it's 3 o'clock now. I understand people have some time, but maybe if Dr. Fuhrmann can answer a few more questions. There's one question about during the presentation, a question was asked about methods where the attendees are using currently to help prepare their mentors are using to help their mentees. Are there any specific methods that you advocate that are more productive than others?
So methods, can you repeat the middle part?
Sort of methods that mentors can use to help their mentees. You mentioned different strategies. Are there any that you think are particularly effective or?
Yeah, on the Idea Spark sheet, there's I think a reference to an article. There might be a couple of articles by faculty where they talk about their own strategies for supporting career exploration and career development. So one of those things is I think IDP tools can be a really great structure to support those mentoring conversations. What I encourage mentors to do is think about that as I would probably normalize by saying, "Hey, my all my mentees," or "This is January, this is May." It's the month where everyone in my group does some thinking about career development, and where annually I meet with all students to talk about their IDPs. So it's not calling out one student; it's everyone as a standard practice. And then I would ask each student to create their IDP. You can give them a worksheet, you can give them your own prompts, you can direct them to something like My IDP or Chem IDP. Give them some kind of framework by what you mean by an IDP, but ask them to go through that on their own time and and then use that to develop an agenda for a career development conversation with you as a mentor. So it's really about the mentees creating their own IDP and using that process of reflection and writing down specific goals if they can to come then meet with you and talk about, well, somewhere where I got stuck was here, or I wasn't sure if I was assessing my skills properly. Can you give me your insights about that? Or I know I want to develop my presentation skills further. Can you help me think about ways that I can do that? Or can I take some time out of lab in the next semester so I can get some more teaching experience? So as a mentor, I think you can really empower your mentees to do some of this process on their own and then come to you with any in a structured conversation that you hold them accountable for, but they're the ones who set the agenda for the conversation and you kind of react and give them feedback. You can also take a more proactive role by asking questions like, oh, like, tell me about the actions thank you for giving me that overview of things you're interested in doing, and where places where you want to grow. Tell me a little bit more about how you want to expand your network, or tell me a little bit more about this. Really help them articulate more specific action steps. And you can also ask them, what challenges do you anticipate when you try to start and go do those types of things? So you can ask facilitative types of questions to help the student tease out things. And you can listen for challenges that you could foresee, like, that sounds like a lot that you're planning to do in April. Are there ways that we can help support you or maybe spread out those goals so that we can make sure that you're also having a good sense of well-being at the same time?
Great. Thank you.
There's somebody had their hand up. Tao Sun, can you ask your question?
Not seem to be.
Cynthia, I'm sorry, I have to go. I do have another meeting. That was really terrific presentation. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right, bye.
Great.
Thank you.
Seems like they've left.
Okay, Dave. We have a couple of quick questions. One of them, so when a student is a TA, they have their own teaching, they're doing their research, they attend in their own classes. How do you convince PIs that to give the students the time to carry out all these different responsibilities, including career planning?
Yeah, sometimes the pushback is this feels like it's a lot. And why are our third year students doing this? They should be in the lab, more focused. This is going to be a distraction. And I would say that actually what the research shows is that when we empower our students and postdocs to be more proactive in their career planning and career development, and even provide opportunities for them to do internships or get experience or do this type of career planning through a course, the students and postdocs feel more confident and again, like have a better sense of self-control, like control over things. And all those things contribute to stronger research productivity. Or, to be honest, like doing some career planning and thinking about how is my teaching going to benefit my future career? Like that can also help motivate them and help them get more out of their teaching experiences. So kind of assessing your range of responsibilities, whether it be research or teaching or other things, and thinking about how those things contribute to your overall career planning and development can be really beneficial.
Great, thanks. I'm going to end with one of my questions, if I can. You did mention the fact that this is a very stressful time. It's a very, I mean, I've been doing this for a while. This is a very unusual time in terms of what's happening at universities and for biomedical research and for NIH. So for a trainee at this position where they might think, oh my gosh, I've got to really change my career path or my goals or reassess. But it's possible that in 2 years, maybe 4 years from now, things will get back to some level of, the way it has been. How do you sort of, discuss the possibility of, well, yes, you do have to maybe make some changes here, or why don't you just sort of wait and sort of see where things play out? How do you manage that sort of wait and see versus it's time to consider other things?
Yeah. Well, some of that question might be, so there's career adaptability within the science ecosystem, right? And there's also career adaptability, which, you know, I think in other years we wouldn't have thought about this, but there might be career adaptability for some people that means like doing things that are not as directly related to science. I've always felt, I haven't been at the bench for years, and I've always felt that, on the face of it, when I entered career development and education, I think a lot of people would say you didn't need your PhD in sciences to do that or your postdoc experience. But I felt that it was always part of my identity that I was a scientist, and I found that I applied my perspective and my knowledge as a scientist to everything that I do. And I suspect that if individuals in science right now find that they need to adapt and move into different types of career paths, they're going to find that they can bring their scientific perspective and approach to problem solving and such and make impact in new, exciting ways in other fields and spaces. I've also always thought that people can adapt and it might take a little bit more work, but they can come back into career, spaces, even becoming a faculty member. I think we've seen scientists who go into industry and come back to academia. There's steps that they might have to take deliberately to do that, but they've done it and they can. So I think we're going to see a future where there's a lot of different wavy paths. Again, these career portfolios that could open a lot of really exciting opportunities, to be honest. And I think it'll be up to each person as to what, where they're feeling as to when or how they might make those adaptations and decisions.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much. So again, Cynthia, thanks. That was wonderful presentation and a lot of great information. Thanks for those of you who joined us today. And as I said, you'll hear more about this presentation later. And so everyone, hope the end of semester goes well. And thanks again. Bye now.
Thank you.